Semiotics and making meaning in graphic design. The word semiotics has its origins in the Greek semiotikos, an interpreter of signs. It is simply the analysis of signs or the study of the functioning of sign systems. The foremost exponents of this field were Charles Sanders Peirce, Ferdinand de Saussure, and Roland Barthes. Charles Sanders Peirce, hailed as the foremost American philosopher, came from an academic family in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He left behind voluminous series of writings, many of which remained unpublished during his lifetime. It is in these that he worked out his logic and philosophy, his theory of signs. Peirce elaborated on a triadic theory of the sign. He identified three primary orders or types of signs. Indexical, which is something that shares a degree of commonality with the original. Iconic, which is the original. Finally, symbolic would be the written, spoken representation of the original depending on convention. For example, indexical here would refer to the impression that the tire has left on the road. Iconic here would refer to the actual object, in this case, the tire. Symbolic would be the written and spoken word tire, as in T-Y-R-E in the English language. Ferdinand de Saussure, the Swiss linguist and semiotician, was born into an academic family in Geneva. He studied languages in history, specifically Sanskrit, Gothic, and Old High German. He pursued synchronic linguistics as opposed to diachronic linguistics, analyzing the conditions for the existence of any language. Looking at the state of language in general, Saussure's theoretical approach to language was viewed as a key starting point. He defined three basic issues. Language is arbitrary and depends on function instead of a predetermined, fixed idea. Language is a series of relationships that exist in combination or in contrasts. Language is a system. The process of signification allows language to be broken down and understood. In this table, we can analyze vertical and horizontal relationships. The table shows vertical and paradigmatic substitutions are interchangeable. It refers to the relationship of similar words, for example, birds, fish, or cows. Give, eat, or see. Worms, water, or milk. The horizontal and syntagmatic substitutions are also interchangeable. This refers to the relationship of the part to the whole. Example, birds eat worms or cows give milk. In essence, these are the rules of the language game which we must abide in order to be understood. Images and texts both are tools of communication in design. The struggles in value judgment and positions taken regarding images are the products of polysemy, or the multiple ways in which a sign can be interpreted. Therefore, text and image can be interpreted in multiple ways. The context changing the meaning. Saussure defined the linguistic sign as a two-sided entity, a dyad. One side of the sign was what he called the signifier, that represents the thoroughly material aspect of a sign. Inseparable from the signifier in any sign and engendered by the signifier is what Saussure calls the signified. This is a mental concept. Central to Saussure's understanding of the linguistic sign is the arbitrary nature of the bond between the signifier and the signified. For example, the word man in English here is the signifier of an actual man, representing the material aspect of the sign. Adventure is the signified mental concept. Therefore, the sign of the signifier and signified together denotes an adventurous man. The arbitrary nature of this concept, however, remains the same in any other language. For example, if the French refer to man as homme, the connotation of the signifier would still remain the same. Roland Barthes was a French literary theorist, philosopher, linguist, critic, and semiotician. His ideas explored a diverse range of fields influencing the development of schools of theory around structuralism, semiotics, social theory, anthropology, and post-structuralism. In analyzing the image in his book on photography called Camera Lucida, Barthes introduced two terms, punctum and studium. These words refer to the impact that an image has on its audience. Punctum represents a violent, sudden prick that shoots out of the image and pierces like an arrow. For example, these images by Robert Mapplethorpe. They exude a frank homoeroticism, which became controversial with regard to issues of obscenity and censorship in the art world. Studium, on the other hand, describes a polite interest in an image, a polite interest to understand and relate to the subjectiveness of the image. Barthes' semiotic practice uses several binary terms which have overlapping meanings. For example, denotation, connotation. These are important concepts to consider in communication design. Based on his ideas on the death of the author, in order for signs to be understood, their meanings must exist outside of themselves. The viewer, based on a particular idiolect, does the work of decoding the connotated message. In the rhetoric of the image, he looks at the combination of the ways in which image and text produce meaning. Linguistic message works as anchorage and relay. A non-coded iconic message has an absence of meaning, full of all meanings. It is a signifier without a signified. A coded iconic message creates a conceptual connection with the viewer. Barthes uses the example of the Panzini advertisement to convey the concepts of connotations. Words and images are used to create a sense of fresh, bountiful wholesomeness that exudes an Italianness about it. Through the concept of myth, Barthes looked at the ways in which the material of the message presupposes a reader. Myth is a constructed form of semiological chain that pre-existed it. In a manner of speaking, myth is another word for language. And ideology, a manner of thinking. Barthes claimed that people create a distorted sense of the world through myth, the surface meaning of things. Myth functions through misrepresentations and mysticism of sight. It organizes an appearance of a world seemingly without contradictions. There are signs and semiotics everywhere we look. Every day, the masses are bombarded with hundreds of images and ideas that tell about myths through signifiers, signified, using image and text. The ways in which concepts and semiotics are conveyed and perceptions created are important considerations for the graphic designer. Media and cultural representation and perceptions change with changing social, political, and historical concepts. responsibility for the fidelity of portrayed perceptions are an important element to take into account in graphic design. As Charles Sanders Peirce has said, to say that thought cannot happen in an instant but requires time is but another way of saying that every thought must be interpreted in another, or that all thought is in science. Thank you for listening.